is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Oteli Edwards. Tonight's top stories. Chinese President Xi Jinping calls for all-out efforts to rescue quake victims in the autonomous region of Tibet, vowing to resettle those affected by the disaster that's left nearly 100 dead, scores injured, and homes in ruins. Now, China and Namibia pledged to deepen cooperation as Beijing's top diplomat Wang Yi hails the time-honored friendship with the African continent. And the U.S. Secretary of State hails strong ties with Tokyo despite a rift over a steel deal. Antony Blinken also addressing progress on the U.S.-Japan alliance, including recent arms sales. Singapore and Malaysia launch a special economic zone in the southern state of Johor with the aim of attracting new investment through tax incentives and creating 20,000 skilled jobs. Also in East Asia tonight, Japan's three largest business groups vow to speed up wage hikes this year as they gather to lay out key issues for the economy. And Malaysia sets its sights on tech-savvy young travelers as it aims to attract 5 million visitors from mainland China. At least 95 people are dead and 130 others injured after a powerful earthquake struck China's Tibet autonomous region. Well, the 6.8 magnitude tremor struck just after 9 a.m. local time, demolishing multiple buildings in the Shigatse region that's home to some 800,000 people. Now, the area is a traditional seat of the Panchen Lama, one of the most important figures in Tibetan Buddhism. The tremors were also felt in neighboring Nepal, Bhutan and India, but there were no reports of deaths or major damage in these countries. Well, meantime, Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for all-out search and rescue efforts and to properly resettle those affected to ensure a safe and warm winter. More than 1,500 firefighters and soldiers have been deployed, joining rescue workers in a race against time to search for survivors in sub-zero temperatures. And for more, we are joined now by CNA's Tan Yuguan in Shanghai. Yuguan, can you tell us a bit more about the affected areas?
Well, the affected area, the worst affected area is actually the county of Tingri. And the villagers in Tingri reported strong shaking during the quake. And afterwards, they actually experienced at least 19 aftershocks with at least 3 in magnitude on the Richter scale. Now, there are 3 townships and at least 27 villages around 20 kilometers from the epicenter, with a total population of around 6,900, according to Xinhua news agency. Now, this location is at the foothills of the Himalayas. It is in the highlands. It borders Nepal, and as you reported earlier, tremors hit Nepal's capital, Kathmandu, as well, and people were reported to have ran out of their houses in Nepal. Oteli?
Well, Yuguan, it is winter in Tibet now. We're talking about sub-zero temperatures. I imagine that's going to make a rescue effort a little bit harder, isn't it?
Yes, rescuers and survivors alike would have to fight the cold. We are talking about temperatures hovering around at most 1 degree Celsius to as low as minus 15 degrees Celsius by night time. Now, what's worse, this very cold conditions will persist for the coming week. Therefore, finding a place for survivors to shelter from the cold will be a matter of life and death. Now, the location is around 4,500 meters above sea level. That also presents challenges for the rescuers, given that altitude sickness is a possibility for some of them. Now, despite the difficult situation, it is reported that the first rescuers were on the first scene by about 4 hours after the 9 a.m. quake. Now, they saw swaths of areas with flattened houses. A glimmer of relief, however, in the very rather bleak situation is that it's been reported that power has been restored to the worst-hit Tingri County, and power will be restored to other areas as well progressively through the night. Oteli?
A small reprieve there as power is restored. Thank you so very much for that report. CNA's Tan Yuguan live from Shanghai. China and Namibia have vowed to advance cooperation as Beijing's top diplomat Wang Yi begins a week-long tour in Africa, praising what he calls the time-honored friendship with the continent.
我们一直在谈这个问题，但是有一点很清楚，中国和纳米比亚的友好合作有非常好的前景。那么我们之间首先是政治上是相互信任的，同时我们经济是高度互补的。最重要的是，中国有坚定的加强中非友好的政策和信念。谢谢您。
Mr. Wang met with the Namibian president in the coastal city of Swakopmund, saying that Beijing is willing to strengthen exchanges on governance as well as deepen collaboration to achieve common development. Mr. Wang says China hopes it can show the world that no matter what happens, Beijing will be the most reliable partner of African countries. He'll also visit Congo, Chad, and Nigeria. The trip comes after U.S. President Joe Biden traveled to Angola last month to boost Washington's influence in the region. And for more, we are joined now by our correspondent, Ajak Mungu, in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Now, Ajak, tell us a little bit more about Mr. Wang's visit and what it means for Africa, because China and the U.S. are jostling for influence in the region. Ajay, just checking if you can hear us. I'm afraid we might not be connecting so well with Ajay there, but we will try to bring her back, perhaps a little later in the bulletin. A U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has met with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba in Tokyo in what is expected to be his last overseas trip in office.
And I think as we look at the last 4 years, we've seen an alliance, a partnership, a friendship that's grown stronger than it's ever been before. If you look at what we've done together on strengthening our security partnership relationship, modernizing our command and control, working together on defense co-production so that we can strengthen our defense industrial base and have an even stronger deterrent. Remarkable steps just in these last few years.
Mr. Blinken's visit comes just days after President Joe Biden blocked Nippon Steel's $15 billion bid to take over U.S. Steel to Tokyo's displeasure. A business group say the decision could have a chilling effect on Japan's standing as the biggest foreign investor in the U.S. The U.S. State Department says that Mr. Blinken will review the progress the alliance has made over the past few years, including a major arms sales approval announced by Washington last week. The top American diplomat also met with his Japanese counterpart, Takeshi Awaya, and thanked him for cooperation in the areas of security, economy, and innovation.
So we know that even though we're in a political transition, the world doesn't stop, doesn't wait for our transitions. There is much on our common agenda that it's important that we're working on. We had just yesterday another missile launch by the DPRK, among many other things. So I look forward as well to looking at where we are and where we need to continue going together.
これらの深い悲しみの中でも訪日いただいたことに感謝したいと思います。トニーの国務長官としての初外遊が日本で、あり、また退任直前に再びお越しいただいたことは日米関係への重視であると受け止めております。
Well, investigators in South Korea have vowed to detain impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol for questioning over his brief martial law decree last month. They're now waiting for a new arrest warrant after the last one expired yesterday. Well, neither the Corruption Investigation Office nor the court has confirmed whether the warrant has been approved, but investigators previously said that the court is unlikely to reject an extension. Rival protesters, both for and against Mr. Yoon, have been camping outside his residence since the first attempt to detain him last Friday. A tense 6-hour standoff with presidential guards forced investigators to give up. Police have now hinted at deploying their Special Operation Unit and arresting anyone blocking their way. Earlier today, the Democratic Party of Korea blamed the failed arrest on acting President Chae Sang-mok. The opposition bloc has filed a criminal complaint saying that Mr. Chae should have ordered security personnel to make way for investigators to detain Mr. Yoon. Mr. Yoon's lawyers have repeatedly called the arrest warrant unlawful. If he's convicted of insurrection, he could face the death penalty. All right, we return now to one of our top stories where China's top diplomat Wang Yi vows to advance cooperation with Namibia as he begins a week-long tour in Africa. And for more, once again, we are joined by our correspondent, Ajek Mungu, in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Well, Ajek, so tell us a little bit more about Mr. Wang's visit, what it means for Africa, because China and the U.S. are jostling for influence in the region.
Yes, indeed. The foreign minister's visit to Africa is quite significant, especially at a time where many of the African countries are going through security, economic and even political challenges. And this is an opportunity for China to reaffirm its commitment to the relationship, the decades-long relationship with Africa, and also to implement some of the agreements that were reached at the FOCAC meeting in September in Beijing last year. And that's what we've seen at his first stop in Namibia when he met with the president and the president-elect, reaffirming the China's strong commitment to Namibia and also promising investment in terms of ensuring good governance and also processing some of its mineral resources. We also understand that Namibia has a beef market in China, and so they're looking to improve some of these relations in terms of agriculture and other cooperation. And his next stop in Congo is also quite significant, looking at the fact that Congo is the next chair or co-chair of the Forum on Africa, China-Africa Cooperation, and that will set the agenda for the next meetings expected in 2027. And also, we're expecting talks in the area of energy cooperation. And he's also expected to be in Chad as well as Nigeria. And that is also significant, given the fact that China is looking to have its presence felt in terms of security and defense cooperation. Chad and Nigeria signed agreements with China at the FOCAC meeting last year to ensure more defense cooperation in terms of training, strengthening the security of these countries, and also is an opportunity for China to take advantage of the opportunity in Chad with the growing anti-French sentiments, with French African countries asking French troops and even U.S. troops to leave. And so this visit is quite important to reaffirm the relationship between China and the Africa continent.
And sounds like both sides have lots to bring to the table. Well, thank you so very much, Ajay Mongu there, live from Abuja. Well, we're going to go for a short break now, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, Beijing slams Washington's move to blacklist Tencent and Kettle for alleged links to the Chinese military. Plus, the Biden administration sued by a U.S. and a Japanese steelmaker for blocking their merger. Hello again. Time now to get you up to speed with the business news with Roland Lim. And Roland, tensions rising once again between the world's two largest economies.
I'm afraid so, Telly. The U.S. has blacklisted China's Tencent and CATL for alleged links with the Chinese military, and that has angered Beijing. Now, China has accused Washington of, quote, unjustified suppression after the U.S. Defense Department added tech giants Tencent and battery manufacturer CATL to a list of companies it says are affiliated with Beijing's military. Now, China's foreign ministry says the move is aimed at curbing the country's high-quality development, adding that Beijing will take the necessary measures to resolutely protect the rights of its companies. The WeChat owner, Tencent, was among several companies that were labeled as Chinese military entities in the Pentagon's blacklist. China's battery maker Amperex Technology, also known as CATL, and Autel Robotics were also included in the roster. The list does not carry specific sanctions, but the designation tends to discourage U.S. firms from trading with these companies. In response, Tencent said its presence on the list was, quote, clearly a mistake, and they add that the move has no impact on its business. The Chinese military company list stems from an order signed by then-President Donald Trump back in late 2020. It was part of a broader effort to rein in what the U.S. had described as Beijing's abusive business practices. Some Chinese firms, such as smartphone maker Xiaomi, have successfully fought to be removed from the U.S. list. Shares of Tencent tumbled more than 7% today in Hong Kong. CATL shares down 2.8% by the close of trade in Shenzhen, and SenseTime, that's a leading AI software firm, also made the Pentagon blacklist, but closing flat after a volatile session. The blacklisting threatens to escalate tensions between the world's two biggest economies. It would also have a major implication for the global EV market, given CATL's extensive presence across automobile supply chains. According to market data, about a third of electric cars have a CATL battery under their hood. Tesla is, of course, its biggest customer. CATL's market share in 2024 was about 37%, well ahead of Chinese rival BYD at 17%. Both firms are jointly responsible for over half of the global EV battery market. Worries about foreign investors further reducing their holdings in local stocks weighed on investor sentiment in Hong Kong and in China. But the mainland benchmark did recover to close in the green. The Hang Seng Index, though, 1.2% in the red, dragged down by a slump in tech majors, including Tencent and Xiaomi. Japan's largest steel producer, Nippon Steel, and U.S. Steel have sued the Biden administration over the U.S. president's decision to block their planned merger. The lawsuit accuses Washington of violating the U.S. Constitution and corrupting the review process for, quote, purely political reasons. Following the legal action, shares of Nippon Steel slipping by more than 1% overnight. U.S. Steel rallied 8%, but remember, the firm had lost about 6% just days ago when Mr. Biden's decision was first reported. For more on the steel firm's lawsuit against Washington, Nick Harper has the latest.
This is a last-ditch attempt by Nippon Steel and US Steel to try and get their merger back on track, a merger that Joe Biden officially blocked last week, with the US president saying US Steel should remain American-owned. The two companies had hoped to combine forces, with the Japanese company buying US Steel and moving its own US headquarters to Pittsburgh, where the American firm is based. US Steel has struggled in recent years with falling revenue and profit. Nippon saw it as a target for takeover and as a way to expand its own US footprint. However, the Biden administration, citing national security concerns, blocked the planned deal after a year-long review. The lawsuit, though, alleges that review process, carried out by the Committee on Foreign Investment, was tainted by politics. The committee did not itself find a national security threat. However, Biden has warned there would be should the deal go ahead. The companies therefore claim Biden used undue influence to advance his political agenda. They also say last year's presidential election had an influence on their merger, claiming Biden tried to curry favour with union workers in Pennsylvania as he tried to get Democratic candidate Kamala Harris elected. The United Steelworkers Union came out against the deal, and both Biden and President-elect Donald Trump signalled in the run-up to the election that they plan to prevent it from going ahead. Trump, though, is not part of this lawsuit, as the decision was taken by the current administration. Remember, Pennsylvania was a crucial battleground state in the election, with US manufacturing a key concern for many voters there. Nippon Steel and US Steel now hope the lawsuit will persuade a federal court to overturn President Biden's ban, which would open up the merger to another national security review, one they hope will be free from alleged political interference. However, it seems like a long shot, as no review deemed a national security threat has been overturned by the courts. Nick Harper, CNA, Washington.
Professor Seijiro Takeshita from the University of Shizuoka says that the blocked U.S. steel deal carries big risks and the knock-on effects could be far-ranging.
This is a typical case of emotion winning over rationale. And if you look at from any economic consequences or bigger picture, I think it's pretty clear that, the Biden administration made a very fatal big mistake here. And I can easily understand why Nippon Steel and the management of U.S. Steel is basically trying to sue the government, basically to turn over the decision, as was the case back in 2014 when Sany Industry, a Chinese firm, their subsidiary in the U.S., basically won against the decision of, the government regarding, I think it was wind power. But of course, the size and the, knock-on effect is far greater in this case. And I think this is a very, very sad case where you will see a negative implication that will be lagged on from here onwards. Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel and basically the companies that are operating the free world have to see things in a much bigger picture. This isn't about Nippon Steel versus, U.S. Steel. It's about, unitarian state competitiveness that are increasing. Basically, the Chinese, steel manufacturers that are increasing both in quantity and quality as well. So we need to gain competitiveness. And in order to sustain competitiveness, the whole reason for this merger was basically to increase and to compete with these rising powers of China. So if you look at in the bigger picture, Japan is basically an ally of the United States. We have 23 U.S. base here. So, basically one has to see things in a much bigger picture here, certainly not looking at, on a corporate basis, but the international competition or hegemony of war between China and the United States.
Now, China is the single biggest influence on global steel markets, producing more than half of the world's steel. A successful Nippon Steel bid would have created a formidable competition for China. Experts say if the legal maneuvers fail, Nippon Steel will be pushed to look for alternative growth avenues that could involve funding a more intense rivalry in markets that Chinese mills do care about. A sharp contraction in Chinese domestic demand and prices for steel, mainly due to a slowing property sector, has led Chinese steelmakers to sell excess steel cheaply into overseas market. And that's put world prices under sustained pressure. It also created much of the momentum for Nippon Steel U.S. foray, as Japan's biggest mill sought to decisively break out of its own fading domestic market. An end of Nippon Steel's U.S. ambitions could shift its focus to other markets where there may be more competition with Chinese mills. Market watchers say those potential battlegrounds range from Southeast Asia to India and Brazil. India is seen as a promising market for steelmakers given the growth potential from its ongoing urbanization and infrastructure build-out. It is one of many countries to impose anti-dumping measures on Chinese imports, which makes Nippon Steel's foothold there even more valuable. That's alongside Southeast Asian countries, including Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia, making them potential markets for expansion. Asian chip-related shares getting a major boost after NVIDIA unveiled new products featuring what it touts to be the world's most powerful chip. Japanese stocks led gains in the rally with renewed AI optimism. NVIDIA chip gear suppliers Tokyo Electron and Disco Corp will close strongly in the green at 11% and almost 7% respectively. Assembly partners in Taiwan also closed up on high precision at nearly 3% higher, and TSMC at 0.5%. And that is the latest in business. Otelli.
Thanks so very much, Roland. Well, we're going to go for another break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, Taiwan's military launches a series of drills simulating how it would defend the island should it be invaded. And Singapore, Malaysia sets up a special economic zone in Johor with businesses in the area to benefit from a tax incentive package and a one-stop business center. At least 95 people have been killed and more than 100 injured after a magnitude 6.8 earthquake rocked Tibet's Shigatse region. The tremor also shook buildings in neighboring Nepal, Bhutan, and India. China and Namibia have vowed to advance cooperation as Beijing's top diplomat Wang Yi begins a week-long tour in Africa. He says that China hopes to show the world that Beijing is the continent's most reliable partner. Antony Blinken says that U.S.-Japan relations are stronger than ever in his final visit to Tokyo as America's top diplomat. Ties have been strained after the White House blocked Nippon Steel's takeover of U.S. Steel. Looking outside of East Asia, Singapore and Malaysia will set up a special economic zone. According to Malaysian media, this will cover the Iskandar Development Region and Pengerang in Johor. Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong and Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim jointly announced this during the 11th Leaders Retreat in Putrajaya.
It's an important project which will build on the complementary strengths of Singapore and Johor, so that we can both be more competitive, enhance our value proposition, and jointly attract more investments to our shores. And by doing so, it will create good jobs and more opportunities for our peoples. When negotiating the agreement, both sides have actively engaged stakeholders to ensure that the SEZ has the conditions to help our businesses grow together for the longer term.
Well, a number of agreements between both parties was also exchanged. For instance, one on carbon credits cooperation and cross-border carbon capture and storage to jointly work out solutions to climate change. Other exchanges include higher education and renewable energy. Mr. Anwar says there is clear commitment and progress from both sides on long-standing issues like water. He says Malaysia is exploring suggestions from Sarawak on the export of energy using undersea cables to Singapore.
We also discussed the issue of flight information region, FIR, recognizing the needs of Malaysia in terms of its connectivity with Sabah Sarawak, but at the same time the requirements of Singapore to ensure that the performance and activities in Changi and Selangor is unaffected and will be further facilitated.
Well, the leaders of Singapore and Malaysia also addressed long-standing issues during their meeting and committed to staying engaged with one another. The two sides also emphasized the need to build a stronger regional force to withstand external pressures. Afifa Arifin with this report.
Starting the year on a positive note, with 2025 marking 60 years of diplomatic ties between Singapore and Malaysia, and the year Malaysia assumes the ASEAN chairmanship. The annual Leaders Retreat provided a timely opportunity for both countries to review bilateral relations and discuss key regional and global issues. Speaking at a joint press conference, Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong underscored the importance of ASEAN unity in staying competitive amid global economic shifts.
In today's world where the big economies are all talking about reshoring, onshoring, nearshoring, they want the key projects to be nearer to their home economies. So ASEAN has to come together, look at ways in which we can enhance our value proposition and be competitive together. And Malaysia and Singapore can form a very important foundation for a stronger ASEAN.
Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim echoed PM Wang's sentiments, stressing the need for ASEAN countries to collaborate rather than focus on divisions.
We have to strengthen ourselves as a regional force to be able to withstand the unpredictable pressures from other areas or groups or regions. We hope that we should collaborate instead of talking about contentious divisions and tensions. But finally, it is how we deal with these issues.
Both leaders also addressed long-standing issues and pledged to resolve them constructively. At the media wrap-up, PM Wang noted progress has been made, but more time is needed to reach balanced, lasting solutions.
So we are, both sides, both Prime Minister Anwar and I are fully committed to continuing the engagement and discussions, and hopefully with the nudging from the Prime Ministers, with the constant engagements we have and the continued dialogue, we can see some progress by the next leaders' retreat across all three bilateral issues, water, airspace, and maritime boundaries. So that's one key priority on our agenda. Second, there will be new projects that we are pursuing, like the SEZ and the RTS.
In response to a question on how firms could be affected as the Johor Bahru Singapore Rapid Transit System becomes operational from end 2026, PM Wang says his government will continue to support heartland enterprises to think of new business models. The resumption of the Kuala Lumpur-Singapore high-speed rail project was also discussed, with PM Wang stating that Singapore remains open to new proposals from Malaysia, starting from a clean slate. However, PM Anwar highlighted that mega projects like the HSR would require participation from the private sector due to Malaysia's financial constraints. Afifa Arifin, CNA, Putrajaya.
Japan's three largest business groups vowed to accelerate wage hikes at a New Year's event where they laid out other key issues for Japan's economy. Among these was the White House move to block Nippon Steel's $15 billion bid to acquire U.S. Steel. CNA's Michio Ishida has more.
Japan's business groups are marking a new year, but the mood in the community is being dampened by Nippon Steel's failed bid to take over U.S. Steel after U.S. President Joe Biden blocked a deal announced back in 2023, citing national security threats. Business leaders are questioning the decision, pointing out that Japan and the U.S. have strong security ties.
日米の安全保障にこれが懸念するというその根拠は何かということをぜひ説明してもらいたいということ。これは影響非常に大きいです。もう日本企業これは5年連続でその対米投資ナンバー1であるわけですから。
Business leaders raised concerns Mr. Biden's move could impact U.S.-Japan relations, but some held on to hope that Donald Trump's return to the White House later this month could change things.
自動車産業を何とかしたいっていうトランプさんがそう言ってるわけで、自動車産業の自動車の作ってるのは鉄鋼でございますから、いい鉄鋼ができることは自動車産業にとってプラスになるわけで、これは日本以上に米国そのものが米国の産業の活性化のためにいい話なんです。それを理解できない今の米国のありようにクエスチョンマークがつくなと。
For the business community, the highlighted agenda is how much wage growth can it push for this year? It's after the strongest rise in 30 years in 2024. They aim for growth exceeding the rate of consumer price hike. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has made accelerating wage hikes a top priority. At the reception hosted by the business groups, Mr. Ishiba also noted that Japan will be hosting the World Expo in Osaka from April. The event is expected to have a positive economic impact, but has faced construction delays and rising costs. Though Mr. Ishiba was undeterred, citing Osaka's previous stint as host city.
皆様方の中で1970年の大阪万博って行かれた方、ちょっとお手をお挙げいただけますか。だいたい 95% ぐらいなんですね。大阪万博はあれ施設が全部完成したのが開会式の52時間前。楽しくて明るくて安全で正確な日本だったと思っております。大勢の方々のご意見を聞き、より良い英知を結集して皆様ともに安全で安心で平和で楽しい日本を作る一年にしてまいりたいと思っております。
Japan's economy is expected to continue to grow at a moderate pace in 2025 by about 1%, according to business leaders. Michio Ishida, CNA, Tokyo.
Taiwan's military has begun 3 days of drills, simulating how it would defend the island should it be invaded. The exercise, which took place in northern Taiwan, saw paratroopers and soldiers storm buildings occupied by enemy forces with the support of attack Apache helicopters and armored personnel carriers. Older CM-11 tanks also made an appearance. They will eventually be replaced by the Abrams battle tanks purchased from the U.S., with the first batch of armored vehicles set to arrive in December.
以我们现在目前的装备的话，我们会是借由营部的陆航官实施路面的通联，所以是由他引导空军部队，我们的陆航部队与我们的地面部队实施火力的协同。
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is claiming success over a new hypersonic missile system test launched yesterday. He says it will help deter rivals in the Pacific region. Well, North Korean state media say that the missile reached a peak altitude of almost 100 kilometers before descending further to a so-called second peak and flew some 1,500 kilometers. It also reportedly reached a velocity of 12 times the speed of sound before landing in water. The South Korean military, however, played down the significance of the test.
북한이 주장하는 비행 거리와 2차 정점 고도 등은 기만 가능성이 높다고 판단하고 있습니다. 한미일이 분석한 사거리는 1,100여 킬로미터이고 2차 정점 고도는 없었습니다. 작년 4월에도 신형 고체 추진 극초음속 미사일을 성능 시험을 한 바 있는데 이에 대한 연장선상의 미사일이라고 보고 있습니다. 또 극초음속 미사일은 종심이 짧은 한반도 내에서는 성능 발휘가 어려울 것으로 판단합니다.
Mr. Kim added that the missile is intended for self-defense, not offense, but went on to claim it can deal a serious military strike to a rival, while effectively breaking any dense defense barrier. The test fire coincided with the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit to South Korea. Well, he and his counterpart Che Tae-yul condemned the launch, and it also comes just days before U.S. President-elect Donald Trump returns to office. The former chief of staff to exiled Chinese businessman Miles Guo will spend a decade in prison for her role in a sprawling fraud and conspiracy case. Well, a U.S. district judge sentenced Yvette Wang, also known as Yamping in New York, for her role in a scheme which swindled more than $1 billion from investors. Mitch McCann was in court for the proceedings.
In their sentencing argument, lawyers for the United States government stated that Yamping Wang, also known as Yvette, was the puppet master behind an elaborate fraud scheme in which investors' money was spent on luxurious sports cars and a New Jersey mansion. Yamping Wang, along with her co-conspirator, the well-known online businessman Miles Guo, convinced thousands of online followers to invest in their entities, including a media business and an exclusive membership program offering access to high-end services. Investors were told that their money would also be used for the common purpose of supporting pro-democracy, anti-Chinese Communist Party causes. In reality, however, government lawyers argued that these businesses were superficial, offered very little benefit, and were merely a means to swindle investors, whom the court heard were caused widespread devastation. This morning, the court heard from Wang's defence lawyer, who stated that she regretted wrongdoing, but spoke of the personal hardships that led her to commit the crimes. Wang's lawyer also claimed that her views on the Chinese government had led to her computers being hacked and her personal information being posted online. He argued that her annual salary between $200,000 and $400,000 was modest when compared to the total sum of money taken from investors. Wang addressed the court before her sentencing, expressing remorse for her crimes, and stated that she had spent her time in prison reading, volunteering, and helping others. The 45-year-old also had many supporters in the courtroom today, whom she frequently turned to and smiled at. Judge Torres sentenced Wang to 60 months in prison for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and another 60 months for conspiracy to commit money laundering, totaling 10 years in prison. A date has yet to be set in the sentencing for her co-conspirator, Miles Guo, who is also known by the names Miles Kwok and Ho Wan Kwok. Mitch McCann, CNA, New York.
Coming up on East Asia tonight, see what Malaysia's doing to hit its target of attracting more than 5 million tourists from mainland China. And we look at the challenges a young Chinese graduate confronts as he travels far in search of a job. Asia is on alert after a recent surge in respiratory infection cases in China. A flu-like virus is spreading across its northern provinces, especially among children under the age of 14. The Chinese Center for Disease Control has urged precaution but pushed back against concerns of another global outbreak. Well, HMPV, or human metapneumovirus, is a respiratory illness, and most cases are mild and carry symptoms of a common cold, including cough, a stuffy nose, and fever. Well, public health experts say there is no reason to be alarmed, as HMPV is a routine virus that sees an uptick in winter season. They say it's likely not pandemic material and is not as severe as COVID or even the flu. Still, HMPV can still pose a higher risk to young kids and the elderly. In severe cases, it can progress to pneumonia. There are currently no vaccines, so doctors are advising the public to stay vigilant and practice hygiene, including wearing a mask and staying home when you're sick. Of course, you can find out more about the virus and how residents in China are responding on our website, cna.asia, and on our mobile app. Now, Malaysia missed its ambitious target of attracting 5 million Chinese tourist arrivals last year, despite a hefty 160% increase from the previous year. Well, industry experts are calling for greater collaboration among tourism players to embrace digitalization and roll out unique products to attract young travelers. Miles Guo tells us more from Kuala Lumpur.
Malaysia is focusing on young travelers this year in a bid to attract more than 5 million mainland Chinese tourists. Known as millennials and Gen Z, these young Chinese travelers are tech-savvy. Many are looking for new experiences, such as cultural and sustainable tourism. The traditional travel fair, catering to huge tour groups, would be a hard sell.
It's a global trend, especially on the Gen Z and the millennials. They're looking for something better. In Beijing, they're having problems with the pollution and everything. So they come here for maybe for the lung cleansing. They want experience. They want to have something that they can bring back. That's the reason why we have to change our mindset. We no longer that we expect groups coming in. Our tourism players need to adapt new things to create products.
At the recent tourism conference in Kuala Lumpur, industry players were urged to embrace digitalization, enhancing artificial intelligence to appeal to younger tourists amid rising costs. And creating the emotional connection is key. Products that are unique, focusing on diverse cultures and ethnicities, culinary experience, as well as environmental conservation would be much sought after.
It's all about experience now.
It is a consumer experience. Yeah.
Cost is just one factor, right?
I mean, cost is always a factor, but I think consumer experience in terms of the journey experience to us is one of the most important factors. We are continuously looking at efforts in fuel conservation, lowering carbon emission, and all those things. So definitely sustainability in aviation is extremely important to us.
While AirAsia is creating its own travel super app, the budget carrier is also planning to add 4 more destinations to the existing 18 cities that it currently flies to in China. Currently, it operates a total of 250 flight frequencies weekly. AirAsia said traffic has increased by 75% since the 30-day visa-free arrangement was announced in late 2023. Meanwhile, seamless online booking and payment systems have greatly facilitated travel between both countries.
I think in Asia, to go smart, to no cash, we all pay on our mobile, and China is particularly very advanced in this area, and we have very popular super app like Alipay, and I know that Alipay Plus, they are now going global. So they are working, especially in Asia, working with different smart wallets in Asia countries. So, which means if I use my Alipay app and I come to Malaysia, it's accepted. I don't need to download another app, and that will really, ease my travel.
Now, with a 30-day visa-free arrangement extended till end of the year, coupled with improved connectivity and new product offerings, Malaysia hopes that Chinese tourists that account for the 3rd largest pool of tourists after Singaporeans and Indonesians will return in droves.
This as Malaysia eyes more arrivals, not just from China, but also from India, Russia, as well as the Middle East, ahead of Visit Malaysia Year 2026. Miles Guo, CNA, Kuala Lumpur.
Looking for employment far from home, that can be tough for many graduates in China who have limited funds to pay for a temporary refuge. CNA's Money Mind details the challenges of one such job seeker as he arrives in a big city.
This no-frills hotel in Shanghai is not just for tourists on a budget.
我就是想找工作嘛，然后我在网上之前跟您联系过，然后有过视频面试。 然后这2天想过去公司看一下。
22-year-old Xiao Zhang made the 15-hour train journey from his hometown of Baoding to China's largest city to look for a job.
我第一次来到上海，对上海这个城市的印象，可能觉得上海它确实要比我想象中的繁华很多。然后这里的人呢，也看起来就很忙的样子。然后看到他们自己也会。 不由自主地想工作。
During his first week in Shanghai, he submitted about 80 job applications. So far, he's been invited to just 3 interviews, but he's not giving up. Xiao Zhang wants to stay in Shanghai and look for a good job, and this budget hotel lets him do just that.
这个地方我是在网上找到的。 我看它离地铁口很近，然后它的价格也很便宜，因为在上海大家生活的成本很高，所以能够帮我节省一些钱，然后并且它这里有很多其他的也在找工作的人，我们可以共享一些信息和资源。
For less than 100 renminbi or $14 a night, Xiao Zhang gets a bed in a room that is shared with 3 other people. There's also a shared bathroom and self-service laundry facility.
我之前从来没有住过这样的青年旅社嘛，我会觉得它可能空间有点小，但是没办法，毕竟一个人来上海这边找工作，还是要忍耐一下。就是这边最近的那个地铁口在哪边？我今天想去就是外滩那边看一看。
坐出门右转。
啊，就是这边下去，然后。 这边右转是吧？
对，然后6号口、7号口。
The Shiguangzhilu Budget Hotel is located in the Jing'an district of downtown Shanghai. Many of its guests are job seekers from other parts of China.
如果住在这个旅馆的话，对我找工作来说，它可能会离我想面试的地方比较近，然后。 他能够提供一些信息给我。
Xiao Zhang graduated with a degree in education about 3 months ago. He tried finding a job as a school teacher in his hometown, but was not successful.
找的也是和我这个专业相对口的工作，就类似于，比如说就是中学的教师这样的工作。在河北的教师岗位的竞争是非常激烈的。 有的时候像比较多人竞争的岗位，大概要有15个人同时竞争一个岗位。对我来说这有点太难了。对于我来说，如果想找到和我专业相对口的工作、相匹配的工作，还是比较难的。我的感觉是会有的，因为在上海它是一个机会非常多的城市。我现在也积极的在各个平台上去投放我的简历，然后也积极的和其他公司在联系。
Well, you can catch the full segment in Money Mind's Going Global, as well as other complete episodes on CNA.Asia, MeWatch, as well as YouTube. On that note, it is time to wrap up Tuesday's edition of East Asia tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at CNA.Asia, and look us up on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching.